Hello, welcome to the May 12th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can simply ask your questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Let me just turn off my monitoring computer. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in kind of a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed. And so I may not be able to answer all the questions in real time. We will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid repeating the same question over and over again, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase or other Steinberg programs that you're using. So if it's Cubase, let me clear my throat real quick. Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Which version number, such as like 13, 14, 15. Also, which operating system. So that would be helpful. So we should have an index of all of the topics that are discussed on today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. I'll take a quick dinner break and go through and type up the index. But if you wanted to search for indexes that have been from previous live streams, we've covered over 44,000 topics, over 2,000 hours. You could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We also have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. So with Jazz Dude and Agent K, so they're not Steinberg employees. They really do it to make it a better community experience. So we're going to give a special thanks to them. We'll express an extra dose of gratitude for Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So if you want to look for different links for tutorials, presets, downloads, that's a wonderful resource of information that's really beneficial to the Steinberg community. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today, and I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so we have Klaus Olsen checking in from Malmö, Sweden. Thanks for joining us. We have Jan from Stockholm joining us, Cubase Index. We see Jazz Dude on. Always appreciate all of your work and effort. All right, so we have Adam Langford joining again. We have Stefan also from Sweden. Track Quest Music says, hi Greg, I want to play a triad chord with a MIDI insert and make the chord play 8th dotted or 8th triplets, whatever, not play up and down. How can I do that, please? All right, so if you want it to play like a particular rhythmic figure, so let's say, let me come over here. Let's say if we have, let me just turn that down to kill. Sorry about that. All right, so let's say if I want to do this as like an 8th note triplets, I could come over here. Let's go to the Arpache SX. And what I want to do, let me just create just a quick 8th note triplet here. So I'll just put it into step mode. All right, so say I'll just do a quick right, so let's see if we have like just a measure of eighth note triplets here. And I'll just take it off of the arpeggiator for now. Okay. And let me just make all these notes the same velocity. Okay, so let's say now if we even maybe drag it to a chord pads, we could open up our pattern. And what I want to do is just to drag this particular pattern over. So let's say we come here, I'm just going to drag and drop that particular pattern over. So now as I would play, so you could just create just one particular MIDI event, and I just put it into like a step sequence mode, and I just kind of played one particular chord. But what it's going to do now, and these are all just eighth note triplets. Then I went to the chord pads, and we went to where you see like the player mode, and you want to say pattern, or you could just drag this directly over to the pattern, and now when you play, so let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish with that. Okay, I'll just reread the question. So let me know if that works. I see that you want to play the triad chord. So maybe another way of doing that. Let's see if we come here to like the MIDI echo. And let's do 2 repeats. And let's make it an eighth note triplet. And let's see if we play. We just take off the so you could also do like your MIDI echoes. Let's do no velocity offset. So if you wanted to actually kind of play in, we could say we want to adjust, let's say our length to eighth note triplets. So we can now. And let's see if we do our beat aligned to eighth note triplets. So if you want to actually play it, maybe you could just play one chord and go to the MIDI echo plugin, set the delay and the length to eighth note triplets. The default setting may have the pitch offset going down. Set that to 0, velocity offset to 0, and set the number of repeats to 3. So as you just kind of play one chord, and if I just open up, just so you can see this a little easier. So let me know if either of those would work for you. Track Quest Music. All right, we have Vince checking in from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you on. Okay, sorry, Chatfield jumped. Okay, so you see from Doctorius J. Hello, asked about showing the actual chords and keys you're playing and did get a chance to figure it out. I have 15 Pro on Mac. So let's say if we are recording here, I'm just going to go into, let's say, a MIDI editor. And so let's say while you're recording, you'll see like the current chord display. So as soon as let me just turn off my particular plug-in. All right, so like as we're recording in, so we'll see in the key editor the current chord display. Sorry, let me just take it off the loop. Okay, so while we're in record now, I think it usually shows it kind of right here on input. Let me just make sure. See if we get to full screen. But usually we kind of see the current chord display up here in the key editor. And I had it working, I think, after last time when you asked about it. But let's try. If I come here again, so let's just create. Make sure I don't have any. I'll remove that MIDI plugin. Usually does indicate it kind of right there. Let me just. So look right there in the key editor and see if you, all right. Okay, next question. Let me just. Okay, so we see from the sound goodifier, is there any way to turn off auto makeup gain on multiband compressor plugin? All right, so let's say we have, take a look at it. I'll do just this guitar part. So let's say. All right, so I'm not sure if, all right, so let me just check, turn off auto gain, makeup. So I'm not sure if it's if the auto gain is engaged. So let's say if I come here, all right, so it's just this frequency range here. So there's the auto release, but it doesn't seem like it's the auto gain. So if I just super compress out, you hear the gain. Even if we're just kind of looking at our gain here versus. So if it's the auto release, then you could just simply adjust the release time. So if you want to. So let me know if it's maybe when you see the auto, if it is for the auto release and not the auto gain. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, we see Benny joining from Sweden. Thanks for being online today, part of the community. All right, so I have a question from Adam. Cubase 15 Pro on Windows question. I have missing plugins that say Studio EQ and channel tools are missing. I've tried rescanning all plugins and still nothing. So usually the Studio EQ is part of the plugin set that comes with Cubase. I'm not sure if it is. There could be other plugins named Studio EQ. So out of curiosity, if you could let me know if you go to the inserts and when you go to the Studio EQ here, and I know it's kind of a generic name for a plugin, but you should be able to open up Studio EQ like this plugin. Let me know if you see this plugin under the EQ category or under the Steinberg category, depending on how your plugins are organized. And then let's check the other one by name. Yeah, so channel tools. So I'm not sure if that's a Steinberg plugin. You could always check if you go to your studio menu to VST plugin manager. So there's sound like effects plugins. So see if you see them listed here. So we don't see one for channel. So that could be a third-party plugin, but see if you see the Studio EQ here, and if it's the Steinberg one. I know that there could be other plugins called Studio EQ. One other way, so see if it's being recognized there. If you could let us know that would be helpful. All right, we see Beverly Beatty joining from Vancouver, Canada. Thanks for joining. Wonderful to see Dwight Cunningham checking in from Bahamas. Sounds like such a great place to be now. All right, so Tim Weinheimer says, hello all. When I'm comping audio, vocal, move front. So sometimes I move the vocal when I don't want to. So can you show me how to move the audio around when editing or comping? see if I still have. My comping project open. No. All right. Let me. Okay, so let's say we have like a stacked recording here. All right, so if you go to the bottom center, you can see all the takes here. So if you wanted to just kind of switch, so you can move, like if you have like 2 takes, you can move it to the front or to the back. But you could also, as soon as you kind of hover over the event, you could see in the bottom center, that would allow you to kind of switch. And of course you could come over here and open up the lanes. So if you don't see the lanes, we can now come over and go to your track control settings. And you'll see your lane display type. So now I can see all of my different takes. So if I wanted to grab my comping tool, I could say, okay, I want this section. And this allows you to kind of select and cut without having to mute a bunch of other parts. So you could try out kind of like your different ideas like this if you wanted to do comping. But if you accidentally kind of moved something, you know, to front to back, try just to, the first thing I would do, if it's not like where you're taking different parts, but maybe selecting between takes, is just go to the bottom center. And with the object selection tool, then you could just choose different takes, and that will automatically send the take you select to the front and the others to the back. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Tim. All right, so we see Imad Salsa says, Imad Sala from Jordan, how can I separate a master audio track in Cubase session without uses the main bus? All right, so I'm not sure exactly what you mean by separate a master audio track. So if it's going to be like a file that's been mixed, like I'm not sure if you want to unmix. It says without using the main bus. So if you wanted to unmix a component, you know, you could use spectral layers. So you get a spectral layers go with Cubase that will unmix vocals. But you could also have a full spectral layers. So if it's, so when you're saying separate a master track, so here I have kind of like a master track. And then once I go to the track and we go to the extensions, I've loaded it into spectral layers. And within spectral layers, I went to the modules and I chose to unmix a song. And this would allow me, and then that will place this into
Does it bring you up to hear your friends talk down? And when a different rolling ego rose, coming back to give you what you're owed. Routine, I wouldn't know by now if I did.
So let me know when you say separated master audio track, if this is kind of the unmixing that you want to do, or if you want to take a mix. I guess maybe it could also be where if you wanted to take a track. So let's say if we have all these tracks in this project going to a master fader. And let's say if I added maybe like a group. So sometimes it could also be maybe if we come here, let's make a stereo group. And we'll call this, sometimes people will create like a pre-master group. So now I could select all of the tracks here. Or I could just select all the tracks and we could just create a group track. So we'll call this our master. I'll call it pre-master 2. So now all of our tracks are being routed to a group track, but we still have kind of our master fader here. So let me know if one of those isn't it, but if you select all the channels, right click, and then you could add the group to, or add a group based on the selected tracks, then all of the tracks here are going to a master audio track that's not necessarily contingent on the main bus. And sometimes people do that for processing or for writing stems. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. And thanks for joining us today. All right, next question. How to copy inserts from one track to another. Okay, so let's say if I come here to my mix console. All right, I'll make this a little taller. Let's open up our inserts. So let's say I want to copy these inserts. So I'm just going to grab the inserts, hold down my Alt or Option key, and let go. And now all of my inserts have been copied over. So if you just grab kind of the insert header, hold down your Alt or Option key before letting go, you'll see as soon as you hold down the Alt or Option key that it turns into a plus symbol. And now you can see that all of those particular inserts are copied to the new channel. So again, click here, hold down the left mouse button, drag, hold down the Alt or Option key, then let go of your left mouse button, and there you are. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan on from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Just checking in from a gloomy southeast Wisconsin. All right, then we have Uno Momento joining from Finland. Great to see you on. We see Randy Lee Music from Texas. All right, Beverly Beatty asks, Greg, question, what would be a quick way to take a loop of hats and add swing to them, or an on-off beat type groove? Sure, you covered this 1,000 times. We'll do it 1,000 more as long as people need to see it. All right, so no problem with that. All right, so there's a couple approaches. So let's say I want to come over to, I think we got some drums here. So let's just put in. All right, so if we have, let's say we're going to do hi-hats. So let's create just a quick pattern here. just get the drum map made here. Okay, so let's say we want to put in our hi-hats. We'll do straight high, eighth note hi-hats. Okay, so let's say we will okay, so a couple ways. One is there's a MIDI plugin that you could use called the quantizer. And here you could just go to the swing and this will affect it. So let's say, okay, I want this to be eighth notes. Now let's say if I had 16th notes instead. So if I come over, just say, okay, let's put in 16ths. Not on that sound. All right, and so if we come back over here, let's say, okay, without our quantizer plugin turned on. So now you can just kind of hear the strength of it. So that's going to alter playback if you actually want it to easily just kind of quantize with the swing. If we come over, let's say we go to the quantize category or open up your quantize panel, which we could also do from your edit menu. You could open up your quantize panel. So once you have that open, you also have kind of your swing, your quantize swing. So let's come over here and say, okay, we're at 16th notes. I want this to be 88%. We see that the values here will swing. It doesn't change any of the notes until I apply the quantize. And now we see that these are evenly distributed across the beats. So now when I apply the quantize, we can see that that quantization with the swing has automatically been kind of built in without using the quantizer plugin. So if you just want to see what it sounds like without having to alter any data, you could use the MIDI quantizer plugin. And if you wanted to just go to the quantize panel, you could set your quantize swing feel right there. And you can say, oh, I want to do a different feel. And the cool thing with Cubase quantize panel is I can now say 60. And it's going to quantize from the original data as opposed to requantizing quantized information. So you could just come over here and adjust your quantized swing right in the quantized panel. Let me know if that's helpful for you, Beverly. All right, so we see from Soren says, I think the bundled software with Cubase was great to get, especially Melodyne Essential. For me, we can see the polyphonic Very Audio there, but not edit. Will Cubase bundle more in the future, Greg? Yeah, so this year they didn't do kind of the partner products, but I think it's obviously very popular. I know sometimes going through all the licensing mechanisms for each of the companies, some people, didn't find it as easy as licensing like their Steinberg products. And, so some people would voice kind of complaints with that. It's kind of out of our realm how each company does their licensing. But I don't know for sure, if the partner products will be coming back, but I'll mention it to the team that the partner products were popular and people liked. All right, so we see from Track Quest Music, says, thank you, Greg. That was very cool. MIDI echo is what I was looking for. All right. All right, we see Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. All right, so we see, don't you think we should get all generative MIDI things we have in a pattern editor and a key editor also in future versions? I think it's fine to have those as two separate workflows. I mean, you could always take a pattern editor once it's been created and converted to a MIDI part. But I think maybe a lot of our traditional composers may not, like a lot of our film composers who live and die in the key editor may not want to have any AI stuff. You could also just, do some of the functionality using, the included MIDI plugins and, render the results. Do a, the freeze MIDI modifiers. But I think it's okay to, have some of the randomness stuff that's really kind of tied into the workflow with pattern creation and kind of have it in there. But I'll pass it along as, a desire for from people and customers. Great. All right, so we see Jazz Dude has received 1 gallon of mint chocolate ice cream from Michael Teams. We hope that your home is all recovered from the storm, Michael. Been in my thoughts. All right, so Soren just says, I have workflow problems with MIDI. Hard to explain. I need to get it sorted out sometime. I sort of get overlaps and there's troubles with settings I got. It's a mess sometimes. If you have a particular project that's kind of a mess for you, you could always send a project over to me, Soren. I know you're great at doing videos when sending questions, but you could always send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Thanks. All right. All right, Parabot2 says, hi, Greg. What are some of your favorite Cubase tools? Thank you. I try to always work not from, I try to always use Cubase not from my own perspective. Like I try really hard to always have the perspective of a user and a customer as opposed to my personal perspective. Some of the things that I really, when I'm doing projects like recording bass parts or rehearsing, I like the automatic tempo detection. I think is really great to be able to kind of work with tempos that have, songs that have varying tempos to get those accurate. I really like kind of the chord detection, dragging a MIDI part or an audio part. So a lot of times people ask me to play bass on a song, and I could just take the song and drag it to a chord track and have all the chords, and that basically gives me a chord track to work with, so I know what all the chord changes are. So the modulators I think are super interesting. I'm also kind of a notation guy, so having the Dorico notation engine inside of Cubase is also very helpful. And just a lot of the plugins, like don't sleep on the included plugins. Like I just did a track and it's going through all sorts of third-party plugins just to see if I was missing something. I was like, okay, the writing room synth that comes with Cubase 15 is so good. It's so many kind of classic 90s synth sounds that people spend lots of money. So always explore the built-in tools. And I like that there's such a complete set of included tools with Cubase. All right. All right, so we see from Srijan Kormo says, how can I create best mix masterings? So if you have like a project, that is, find something that's not heavily mastered. So if you want to do mastering type of processing inside of Cubase, there's obviously wonderful tools for that. If you need to do dynamics, there's multiband compressors. There's also going to be, so let's go ahead and just solo this. So let's say it's a well-mixed track from my friend Clay Oswald for 7th Crossing project. So if you wanted to do, so here just in what Clay delivered was kind of like a bit of a maximizer. If we want to go kind of extreme, so let's say if I wanted to like do kind of an aggressive mastering, you may kind of never sleep on Squasher. So let's just say we want this for so this will allow you to do kind of up-down compression. And let's say maybe I'll add a little stereo imaging. And what's cool, like we could have stereo imaging different frequency ranges. So if I wanted my bass to be really tight mono, instead of being kind of very bit fluffy, like if we come here, with just a little touch. But if we were to, just with the Squasher plugin, it's a hidden gem that's inside of Cubase. So again, bypass just with a tiny bit of imaging and the Squasher. So that'd be like one of the first ones I would probably use and check out. Yeah, and see, just a quick reminder, Jazz Dude, to mention that this Friday we won't be having a live stream because I have to do a door code training for a school system in Illinois. All right, thanks for reminding Jazz Dude. He's so good. All right, so we see Jay the Jolly says, hi, once again, loving these streams while I'm still learning Cubase. I hear the drum synth included artist has an FM percussion section. That told me so I'm upgrading next month, and I'm excited. So we're delighted to have you on the live streams. Thanks for joining us. All right, Tim Weinheimer has received 1 gallon of mango pecan ice cream. All right, so we have Alex joining from Mojave, Arizona. Great to see Peter from Montreal. All right, so we see Greg question, could I also ask you a quick way to swing hats that are audio wave files? All right, so let's say if we wanted to just, so I'm not sure if we have the hi-hats that are just kind of rendered, so let's go ahead and jump back here. Okay, so it's going to undo the quantize. All right, so let's say we go back here. We're going to have our hi-hats. Okay, and I'll just duplicate that a couple times. Okay, and now I just will render in place. Okay, so we have, let's say, our audio file of hi-hats here. And it's really going to be the same exact process, but what we would do is just make sure that we have audio warp quantize turned on. So let's come over here, let's do 88%. And then when we do our quantize, we can see that the hi-hats have now shifted. So it's really, audio and MIDI is really quantized in the same way. You just need to make sure when you're doing audio that you have audio warp quantize checked. So really the same, almost the same exact procedure. See, Tim Weinheimer just says, glad I can remember the question I want to ask when the live stream is going. It's a great thing is computers. You can take notes and everything. All right, Michael Teams has granted myself and my family 1 gallon of coconut almond fudge ice cream. Sounds great. Thank you. Always appreciate it. All right, we see that Michael Teams is all repaired at the homestead after a storm. It's great to hear. Brian Sawyer's received 1 gallon of mango melon ice cream. All right, so we see Daniela Tokan as Da Vinci Girl checking in from Bochum, Germany. All right, Jay the Jolly says, the jazz track you played at the moment of me writing this, you said was really well mixed by your friend. Is this a specific subgenre of jazz? Sounds so nicely full and harmonic in a way I quite like. Yeah, so it's an album. It's off an album project by Seventh Crossing. So it's my friend Clay Ostwald, and he's been musical director for Gloria Estefan, I think, he's probably going on 40 years now. So it's kind of a side project with like a lot of the people in Miami Sound Machine, like Gloria Estefan's kind of legendary band, as kind of, like their personal fun project to do. So I would say it's probably more Latin jazz, and having many friends that are jazz artists, it's always like if you say smooth jazz, it kind of has a particular perception that a lot of the jazz musicians don't like. They may not want to be associated with like a what a lot of people perceive as smooth jazz, so they could kind of play jazzy things, but that might be more kind of Latin jazz, maybe Latin jazz fusion, but there's also like really great vocal parts on their projects as well. So, but yeah, check out Seventh Crossing. I think they had 2 CDs out, done by my friend Clay Oswald, who lives near me in Washington, D.C. We had lunch a couple weeks ago. It's great to catch up with Clay, and he's on the live streams periodically as well. All right, Astrophotoid asks, Cubase 15 Pro, Mac OS, Army Fireface, 32 sample buffer, external instrument MIDI from a track plays in sync, but if I record the synth to an audio track, the audio records ahead of the grid. Help, thanks. Okay, check to make sure, like when you go to your studio menu, to studio setup, and if you go to the audio system, see if you have like the adjust for record latency. So make sure that that is checked. If you know that it's like if you have the MIDI itself and the audio, and you know like exactly like you know how many samples, like if you're finding it off, and it could also be like if you have plugins like in real time, but you know sometimes you know if you are looking at something, so let's say if we zoom in, we can say, okay, and this is after we did the groove, but you can say, okay, the position of this is this time, but the audio file starts here. Then you could just do an offset if necessary. Generally, you shouldn't have to, but check to see if you have different plugins that are enabled. That, you know, sometimes some plugins don't report the correct latency. But when you come over here, and this is probably found under the advanced options, so you may have to just open that up, but make sure you have the adjust for record latency checked here. And all right. Okay. Tim Weinhammer just says, a great thing about the Steinberg included plugins, I don't always have to buy a version of the effects plugin. Update every couple years. Also like the volume plug and the Pultec plugins are added. All right, so Astrophotoid is just saying hi from sunny UK. Thanks for letting us know where you're at. So it just helps me visualize it a lot easier. And it's great to have you on the live stream. Okay, so we see from Alex says, hi Greg, regarding the melodic pattern editor, when I change the step resolution, the bars shift, but not the inputted notes. So I have to move them over. All right, so let's take a look. Let's say if I'm here in my... All right, let me just add a melodic pattern. Okay, so I'm in melodic, so let's say if I will make this to D major. All right, let me just... Okay, so all right, so we have our pattern. Let me just drop it an octave here. Okay. All right, so when I change the step resolution, the bars shift, but not the inputted notes, so I have to move them over. All right, so let's say I think it could be this little, that the number of steps follows the resolution, so it could be this little. So let's see if I try to turn this off and I switch to eighth notes. So we're playing at half the tempo, so if I switch this to 16th notes. Just so, but if we come here, so let's say now the number of steps follows the resolution. So let's say if I adjust my number of steps here, so let's say we go to 8. So try maybe adjusting, like, check this icon here that the number of steps follows that. So now so see if that makes sense for you, Alex. All right, so we see Adam says I did not find it in the inserts. So I think if that's with the Studio EQ, so generally, I mean, that's a plugin that's not sold separately. That's going to be a plugin that is installed with as a core component of Cubase. You could try to reinstall Cubase again and see if the plugin shows up, but it's not like it's kind of like embedded into a single plugin set file. It's not a separate file that's kind of copied as an individual .vst3 file. So maybe if you try to, if it's with the Studio EQ, try to reinstall Cubase or see what happens. Like when you start Cubase, if you get kind of, it can't hurt to, if you go to your VST plugin manager, something that can't hurt is just to rescan the plugins and see if it shows up after a rescan. If it doesn't show up there, you could see, if you hold down, like, I'll just show this on 14, but if you hold down Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift when starting the program, you could choose to just, you could see if you deactivate third-party plugins and disable program preferences on startup, if that makes any difference. If you're still not seeing it, then I would just reinstall Cubase, and that should, reinstall all of the particular plugins from scratch. Thanks for letting me know. Right. Just exit out of 14 here. Okay, so we see further follow-up from Alex is for the melody pattern editor, I'd like to be able to adjust the notes manually for, say, a partial beat. It doesn't respond the same way as the MIDI editor. So let me know if what I showed was helpful or not for you, Alex. If not, just mention again and we could go over it. So we see, hey Greg, can you recommend a video that does a real deep dive into Groove Agent? I'm trying to hold off spending $2K for an MPC XL when Groove Agent could do the same with my old MPC 62. I don't know of one off the top of my head. I'm sure that there are some, maybe who does wonderful tutorials on instruments like Hallian. He probably has one on Groove Agent as well. Check out One Man in his songs. But let me know if there's like anything in particular with Groove Agent that you like. I wish it could do this, or I want to do that, because there's a lot of things that Groove Agent can do that, you know, a lot of people don't know. And I, you know, used to, you know, when I worked in studios like, you know, 34 years ago in New York, kind of during the, you know, the height of hip hop production in big studios, you know, like so much of it was an MPC 60, and it was, you know, there's reasons for it at the time, but you know, I think it's a workflow that's very limiting in a lot of ways. But if there's anything in particular, so check out One Man and his songs. Probably Jazz Dude can post a link, but he may have some like detailed Groove Agent videos. I would check that out, but let me know if there's anything in particular that you can't figure out how to do in Groove Agent. But I wouldn't buy like a piece of hardware to try to replicate something you're getting as part of your Cubase. All right, so we see from Parabot 2 says it will not purchase anything third party. Cubase has so many great tools. It really is amazing what is included. All right. Okay, just reading through comments. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this. Sorry for my brain cramp. I feel like I'm missing some Steinberg plugins. So, you know, check there is a separate like plugin reference manual. Also, let us know like which operating system you're on. You know, if it's like Windows 7 or an older Mac OS, or you're running a Mac OS in like an M1, like a silicon processor, but you're running in Rosetta mode. If you give us some more details, that could be helpful as well. All right, so we see from Jay the Jolly, says you mentioned Latin jazz, and it's something I've been very curious about since playing Gran Turismo 3 and 4 as a kid, of all things. Says, hope to reach that level of piano skill one day. Yeah, Clay Oswald, he's incredibly humble, but just such a great musician. Everything that he touches just sounds so great musically, and it's just like his philosophy, his approach to things, just so good. So if you get to watch like a Gloria Estefan live thing, I got to see them do an NPR Tiny Desk concert in Washington D.C., which was a lot of fun. But you could watch Clay play there's all sorts of videos on YouTube of him performing with Gloria, but check him out. Just really just phenomenal person. Clay grew up in Boulder, but he's kind of an honorary Cuban in that circle. So, see 54 Beatmaker asking I passed on the batch route feature. So yeah, it did. Sorry, it doesn't do that already. Okay, so we see Da Vinci Girl says, we bought this month Scarlett 3 Generation 18i20, and I was surprised how bad the monitor headset outputs are. They are optimized for high impedance and distort lots with my low impedance AKG headphones. Yeah, so different headphone amplifiers. Sometimes a lot of people, I think there's many companies, if you have to cut a corner somewhere, may err on the side of having better converters and not worrying so much about the headphones, as a lot of people are buying audio interfaces, maybe not for the headphone outputs, but generally most audio interface product specifications will give you an idea of the headphone impedance, and you could see if that headphone impedance matches matches with your current headphones. But there's a lot of consoles had problems with AKGs as well, and people would have to use kind of like external headphone amps. I remember studio I did, like that song Rude Juliet, decades ago. You had a Tascam M3500, and it didn't like the AKG headphones, like for impedance mismatch. All right. All right, Beverly Beatty says, Greg, can you please explain the mix console section? It shows up 4 mix consoles. Why so many here for the same project with? Thanks. All right, so the reason why we have like 4 separate mix, we have 4 mix consoles. All right, so we have mix console, you go mix console 2, mix console 3. All right, so each of these particular mix consoles can show different elements of the project. So someone may have a mix console for all of their audio tracks. One may be a mix console that just shows virtual instruments. One may have a mix console that just shows inputs and outputs or groups. So this way you could have, instead of having to hide different components, and this is often applicable, we see it a lot in film composers, I think my friend Danny Lux at one point was like 3,400 tracks for his template. So at that point, having lots of ways to quickly see the different elements. So again, different types of tracks in different mix consoles. So if you're running like 24 tracks, you may not have to use multiple mix consoles. But if you're like, okay, my project template has 128 or 256 groups of orchestral instruments, and I need to be able to access, and I don't want to scroll through 3,000 tracks of audio to get to my 256 group tracks, then, being able to customize the mix consoles to say, okay, I only want to see in mix console 2, I only want to be able to show, group channels, or I just want to see inputs, nothing else. So I come over here. Now I just have my inputs for tracking. Now I have a different mix console, and I just want to see my group channels, or I want to see my VCAs. So it allows you to kind of, have 4 different virtual views of different aspects of your project. So again, primarily could be more beneficial for higher end, like high track content projects. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on. All right, so we see from Jay the Jolly, this may be a big ask, but can you show how MIDI to sheet music notation works in Cubase? I'm curious, even if I don't read sheet yet, if I understand correctly, you can use it to do something like that. So yeah, we make, Steinberg makes probably the most widely used notation program now, Dorico. So if you're like primarily, working with, working where you're doing like, big orchestral work, Dorico or education, or you're a composer who looks at like a blank staff. Dorico is, probably the most comprehensive scoring package, which, and since it's part of Steinberg, we thought it would be cool. So let's say we have MIDI notes here. So I'm going to take this particular track and we will come over here. Sorry, wrong keyboard shortcut. All right, so a lot of times, let's say we have so we could look at these notes kind of graphically. Or we could say, okay, I just want to now see it in my score editor. So let's say, like, if we come over here, we can say probably it's going to be B minor. So let's go ahead and drag our chord. So, and if you want to go in, so you could do like full professional scoring. Now, if you wanted to take this and do more engraving, where you're like, okay, I want to get into like very granular details of, the angle of this slur or tied note is, I want to adjust that. That's when you could go into Dorico, but basically it's the Dorico scoring engine that is inside of Cubase. And then once you're done, like if you need to do more advanced notation purposes, you can export the Dorico project directly and open it straight into Dorico, so you don't have to do music XML or standard MIDI files where you lose a lot of the nuance of the particular information. So, and then you could import Dorico projects, you could come over and export Dorico projects and work hand in hand with them. But the idea is just to make kind of a beautiful score. So like, one of the scores I just did, I had an orchestral performance Sunday. And sometimes when you get our music, it could be like 50 years old and read by like 1,400 orchestras, and we get like a PDF scan of it. And sometimes the music in this one particular piece was kind of very handwritten and it's difficult to read. So a lot of times I will, if we get a score that's pretty ugly to read for the bass section, I will just simply redo it. And everyone in the bass section loves me for doing this so that we could so this is what, the same font that we would see inside of Dorico that we have in Cubase, and we want to see kind of the printed version. I could come over and, when we want to zoom in, you can see, all of this type of notation you could do in Cubase. But again, Steinberg takes our notation very seriously, so that, if you're composing in Cubase and you need to, hand it off to the orchestra, then you could just simply do all of the final parts preparation inside of Dorico and have everything kind of, and not lose and try to recreate data that you did in Cubase. So many noted film composers, you can check out Alan Silvestri is a great kind of use example of migrating from, both realms of composing in Cubase and printing out his parts in Dorico as well. So he's done like, Back to the Future and all sorts of amazing Avengers, I think he did. So it's super nice, man. But yeah, so you have incredibly capable scoring inside of Cubase. All right. Saber Winters has received 1 gallon of frozen peach mango ice cream. Okay, so we see from Enrique Martinez, how do you apply swing quantize to Asta and Cubase? So we'll show the swing quantize again. I think we still have it up. Okay, we showed this just a little while ago for Beverly. Okay, so I'll just join these together. All right, so let's say we listen to this. So if we go to our quantize panel, so I'll just open up our quantize panel. We could set your quantize swing amount. So let's say I want it to be 80%. And now we can, so we'll just slow down our tempo here. So here we'll just, so here I'll just, so when you open up the quantize panel, you could just simply come right over here and just set your quantize swing amount. You could also access that directly from your quantize swing right here. Set that to, so if I say 60 and apply the quantize. All right. Danielle has received 1 gallon of mango Bavarian cream ice cream from Mr. Teams. All right, so we see, hello Greg, can we get the Etude Element piano for free like Dorico users? So currently it does come with Dorico, but not with Cubase, but Cubase also comes with the Verve piano that doesn't come with Dorico, so you kind of have different piano instruments that come with Cubase and some that come with Dorico that could be slightly different. So some Dorico users want Verve, and some Cubase users want Etude Elements. So but yeah, check out the full Etude library. I have a piano snob friend that I help out with his Cubase, and it's his go-to piano. He loves it. All right, so we see, hello Greg, one question. When mixing, after selecting a channel, pressing one key from my keyboard, I want to open and close all the plugins, insert it in that channel. How can I do it? All right, so let's say if we come over, so I know it's not from the keyboard, but let's say if we go to this track where we have multiple inserts, I think if we click on the E here, we just think I usually forget where this is. Let me just try. But there is a way. I'm just trying to remember. Okay, so if you hold down Alt or Option plus Shift on the edit, that will open all of them up. So let me just, so holding down this, so let's see if we could, and then you could close all insert plugins. So let's see if we could program that in maybe with the MIDI remote or a macro. Sorry, wrong. All right, so let's see if we go to this track. I'll just see if, I don't think that this will do it. No. So hold down Alt, or so you can't trigger it from a keyboard shortcut, but we can just come over here and hold down Alt or Option plus the Shift key and click on the Edit Channel Settings. And then under the Windows menu, you could close all the plugin windows. And then I'll just take one. I think I've looked in the Project Logical Editor, see if we could. There was something added in 15 that might help with this. So let's say if we could, maybe we choose Select. Let me try another. Okay, let's try this as a macro. So you'll see under mixer, you'll see inserts 1 through 16. Let's see if this works. Okay, so basically we're opening up inserts 1 through 16. So let's come over here, and so we have this track selected. We'll run the macro and then close the macro. So once we've made that macro, I could come over to like my key commands, and so we go to your key commands. We could say, okay, let's go to open all inserts, and we could just program this. So I've assigned a key command to that, so now I could just open and close all the inserts on that particular channel for you. So let me know if that's helpful. And you could also program that if you want to do it from your keyboard. If it's a MIDI keyboard, if you go to like your MIDI remote here and say, okay, I want this to be, so we'll say this, and we'll assign this to open all inserts. So apply that mapping. So now I go to my controller, I could just open and close all the inserts on that particular channel. So once again, the macro, so if you go to your key commands, and we can say open and close all inserts. Just come over here, you'll see under the mixer, insert 1, open close editor. So you can just do that directly from a macro. Okay. Okay, so we see for Alex says, yes, the chain link did it. Thanks. All right. All right, so Chris Hall 00. As a Cubase and Wavelab owner who pays for the same plugins twice, couldn't Steinberg make some of their basic and relevant plugins in Cubase instead of expecting me to buy third-party plugins? I ask again because you were dismissive with a stock company line. When I asked in the last call, I expected a more customer-centric approach. So, I'm not sure if you're wanting So sometimes you are paying for similar technology twice, but they are two separate licenses. So I'm not sure if, like, you think that if you own both programs that there should be a discount because the plugins are the same. So, or if you want it, like, maybe let me know which particular plugins from Wavelab that you want. And there's some that'll be in Wavelab, and obviously there's some in Cubase that, like, virtual instruments, since Wavelab doesn't do MIDI. So, but maybe clarify again. But I think that, sometimes there will be separate plugins. Just like Nuendo will have more plugins in Cubase. Cubase Art Pro will have more plugins in Cubase Artist, just as a differentiator. All right, so we see Beverly just saying thanks, Greg, regarding the mix console overview. All right, so we see, hello, Greg Thomas from Germany. How's the BPM detection in MediaBay working? I've changed the metadata of MIDI files, but Cubase shows always 120 BPM. So generally, MIDI files don't have the tempo information is going to be part of the MIDI file itself, but not necessarily metadata. So let's just do a new project. Okay. Okay, so we have MIDI here. Let's put my tempo to 100. Okay, so we listen to. All right, so let's go ahead and export this as a MIDI file. So we go to export a MIDI file. So let's say. All right, so we could choose to export, let's say, a resolution. Okay, so make sure. Okay, so we'll go ahead and export that to. Okay, so I'm going to do remove this track. I'll close this project. We won't save. Let's go to Cubase here, and we'll say let's import our MIDI file. So generally the tempo is embedded within the MIDI file, and it's not necessarily metadata like that we would see for tempo information for like a drum loop. So let's go ahead and create a new project here. Let's go to our desktop, a MIDI file 100 BPM test. This is one we just made. And we'll open it up, and we can see that our tempo is 100 beats per minute, where it was 120. So even if we do new project, and our tempo is now set to 120, and we import the MIDI file, we won't create a new one. All right, so now when we do that, it's going to automatically go into the existing. But if we come over, let's get to our tempo track. So because it's the existing project, but now if we want to go to MediaBay, and quickly let's look at our desktop for MIDI files. and we can see a MIDI file, 100 BPM, has the tempo embedded in the MIDI file for 100 beats per minute. So let me know if you actually, if like you had the tempo track enabled when making the MIDI file, but it looks like the metadata here, the tempo is automatically extracted here within MediaBay. So let me know if I'm missing anything with that. Wonderful to see Michael Marshall on from Somerset, UK. All right, so we see, sorry, my chat field just jumped. See DaVinci Girl say Dorco is maybe the better product, but no community like in MuseScore, no compatibility with MuseScore file format. So generally, for notation, it's going to be music XML and also MIDI files. So I don't think that you could open. There's no compatibility in MuseScore for the Dorco file format, I don't believe. So I think that they're two different types of solutions. So MuseScore is obviously a free solution, but we have tons and tons of colleges that have migrated entirely over to Dorco, especially in the US. So, and I would say that Dorco has an incredibly strong community. So you can check out like the Discover Dorco sessions with my colleague John Barron, and I think that the Dorco staff is incredibly proactive in responding to customer inquiries and questions. So there's a great community. Maybe you haven't really jumped into it, but there's wonderful community for Dorco, and those guys are just on fire. All right, so we see from Jay the Jolly, says, great with sheet music features. As someone with ADHD who struggles with recalling memory, it could be a nice thing for me live when I learn sheet music, which is doing a little bit inside. So yeah, reading music's a beautiful thing. I think to me, like reading music and playing music is like talking and reading. So there's lots of incredible musicians, obviously, who don't read music. And there's a lot of musicians I play with in my orchestra where if you said improvise, play something that's not on a sheet, they wouldn't be able to kind of just play music without music being in front of them. So I think having the best, being able to do both is great. So again, I always liken it to don't be a musician who could only read and not talk, or don't be a person, or don't be a musician that can only play and not read. So reading and playing is good. So it's a great skill. Okay, Da76 Watt asks, when having markers set for a chorus, why does Cubase jump back to the start of the bar when recording instead of starting at cursor position? What am I doing wrong? All right, so if it is a MIDI information, so it could be a couple things. So let's say if it's MIDI information here, let's say my marker, let me just add a marker track. Okay, so I want to record, let's say my marker is right there. Okay, so let's say this is my chorus. So when I just come over here, I'll just, all right, so it's just, we'll call it, just put in a description of chorus. Okay, So if I go to record MIDI information, I'll give myself a 1 bar count in. Here, let me just take cycle off for now. Okay, so my chorus is in the middle of a measure, so when I go to record, we may notice that. Here, I'll just... Okay, so it may record the MIDI data and place it at the beginning of a bar. So if it's doing that, there is a preference. So if we go to your settings or preferences and under record, let's go to MIDI. I think snap MIDI parts to bars. So if you're recording MIDI information, it's that. Now also there's different like start modes in the transport. So let's say if I'm here, we go to our transport, and then we're gonna have different start modes. So I could say let's start from the project cursor position. So like here when I play, so now when I start playing, it's going to immediately go from the project cursor position. Now if I have an event selected, and if my project start mode is start from the cycle start, so now when I hit play, I hit the space bar, it's going to go to the beginning of the left and right locator, the cycle. So now when I hit play from here, it jumps back. Now there's other start modes. So if we go to our start mode, say start from selection start, so this event is selected. So now when I hit play, it bases it on that particular event. And again, come to start mode here. Let's say we want to do the selection or cycle start. So let's say I have a selection. So now when I hit play, it's going to go to the selection. If there's nothing that's selected, it'll go to the start mode of the cycle. So check to make sure that your start mode is set here under transport, probably to start from the project cursor position, and your cursor is there. Or if we have that selected, we could use our start mode. And at this point, we'll do it from selection start because this is the marker is selected. So when I hit record, we could just roll back right from that particular marker as well. So I could just choose that marker and play from there. So it could be a combination of, if it's just MIDI and snapping back to the bar, that preference again, or setting under, not in the audio settings, but in the preferences or settings. So if you come here, MIDI, so record to MIDI, snap to MIDI parts to bars, or you could just simply check the start mode. Okay. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl says Music XML and Steinberg does not work for me, and there's a high risk that if I use it in the future, is no VST2 compatibility. So Music XML has nothing to do with VST2 or VST3, so it's completely independent. So Music XML is just a container file for moving, so it doesn't include any reference to plugins whatsoever. So there's no concerns of Music XML and VST. So, all All right, great to see Mark Rabin on. Everyone give a big woof to Stella, his dog. Great to see you on, Mark. Hope you're well. So one quick programming note again. No, we will not have a live stream on Friday because I have to do Dorco training for a new school system. Just bought a bunch of copies. Mark received 1 gallon of Mango Supreme ice cream. All right, great to see Tiago joining from Brazil. Thanks for being part of the community today. All right, reading through comments. All right, we see Gareth joining from the Rod Ice Shelf. All right, making sure we're having Antarctica represented well. Appreciate it, Gareth. He's searching for a Gartha. It's a good Hot Mess reference. Okay, reading through comments. All right, Tiago asks, is there a way to back up all project logical editor presets and other user presets such as key commands or presets? So it's all kind of included within a profile manager. So if you come over here to your edit menu and go to profile manager, and all you have to do is export it, and then you could choose to import the profile into another system, another computer, or save it as a backup, put it in your Google Drive, or if you need to recall different settings on the same computer, or just to back them up, just save them as a profile. So once again, go to your edit menu and go directly to the profile manager, and that will back up all of your user presets, all the goodies right there. All right, so Tiago is saying it's 15 degrees Celsius, which is cold for autumn in Brazil. All right, Gareth wants everyone to remember to smooch the like button so that my cheeks can turn red. All right, so we have Taylor from Music for World Peace Records joining from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Great to see you on, Taylor. All right, so we see, is the new mix key compatible with Windows 11 or Windows 10? Sorry, I haven't tried it on Windows 10. Let's see if there's like specific system requirements. I'm inclined to think that it would work. Let me just... Let's see if there's system requirements. Yeah, so it looks like, yep, so it looks like it's Windows 10 here. So you could always, I don't see it specifically listed there, but it looks like it is for Windows 10. So. All right, great to see Virtual Alan from Scotland. It says, each time I watch these streams, I learn more cool tricks and methods that really improve my workflow. Thanks, Greg, and thanks for all the questions. So we see, is OmniVocal available as a plugin that could be used in Cubase 12? So maybe limited. Let me see if I could run it in 14. Maybe limited to Cubase 15. It's currently not sold separately. It's part of Cubase 15. But we'll see if it shows up in 14. If it doesn't show up there, then I would say it's not going to work in 12. So it might be a Cubase 15 requirement. Yeah, so it's only going to be in 15 or higher. All right, so we see from Chris Hall, it says, is it too much to ask for a headphone match to be available in Cubase? I have Wavelab and Cubase. I will mention it, but, you know, it could be, sometimes there's the plugins that differentiate between the two. I realize a headphone match could be very useful for Cubase users. I will mention it to the team to see if there's any possibility of headphone match being rolled into Cubase as well. All right, so we see the topic BPM MediaBay. Many thanks, Greg, for your support. Had no tempo track embedded. All right, so glad able to get it figured out. All right, so we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands with his cat Buddy, who's waving a paw. Hello to my cat Steven, Stella, who's on the live stream, and other pets that are nearby. Great to see you on. Okay. All right, Beverly Beatty asks, Greg, question, can you please go over multiple vocal alignment where the same Vox phrasing over several tracks are aligned very tightly to a chosen audio track? Yeah, an example. See if it's my recent list. Okay. So let's say. Sorry about that. All right. All right. So let's say we could visually kind of look at these and see that they're not quite as tight as we would like them to be rhythmically. So to fix this, we could open up our audio alignment panel. So there's an icon right here, or you could go to your audio menu and you could open the alignment directly from there. So what I want to do is I'm going to select this track, and this will be our reference track. Okay, I'm going to select these tracks below it, and these will be our targets, and we could assign multiple tracks for our targets. I usually check match words and prefer time shifting. You could adjust the amount of precision, but I'll just come right over here and I'll say align audio, and now we listen to it. So where it was before. To so again, go to your alignment panel. You could open it directly from this icon here, or from your audio menu, open audio alignment panel, and then set the source and the destinations. Okay, read through comment. See, Mark Raven says, I'm a freak. I use Paradigm Towers and B&W 2As and Aura Sound, crappy but reveal lots, and K210s, AKG headphones. Jazz Dude says, I break every headphones at least once per year because I'm a messed up guy and tons of equipment and cables. I chose to stop buying headphones that didn't have detachable cables. So, where one cable in a headphone goes bad and you spent a lot of money on the headphones, and then you have to throw the headphones away because the cable's kind of fixed. So my rule of thumb is I only buy headphones with detachable cables now. All right, Jay the Jolly says, how long you been doing these streams? Shame done on Friday, but I'll be excited for the next one still. Legendary place for learning Cubase with a great voice too. Thanks for your teaching so far, man. So we kind of ramped it up. We were doing it like once a month before COVID, about once a month before COVID started. Depending on my travels before COVID, I used to fly constantly. So I was the guy that was doing like 120 flights a year. Flying all over the U.S. and like once, maybe twice a year to Germany, occasionally to Japan and Canada, doing public presentations, and that all stopped during COVID. So during COVID, I think it was like March 17th, so pretty early in COVID, we started doing the live streams. I did one on a Tuesday, and then I asked people if they wanted to do another one that week, and I said, how about Friday? And so for more than 6 years, we've been doing it almost every Tuesday and Friday, unless I have another commitment, which is pretty rare. So we'll probably do 45, or if I'm on vacation, we'll probably do about 45 live streams a year. So or about 90 live streams a year. So we've been kind of doing it roughly twice a week. We will take some time off for Christmas holidays if I'm on vacation, or if I have to do like a seminar or somewhere, like I'm doing a training. But we've been doing it pretty proactively for the last 6 years. So, and I think it's just been great that we're able to kind of communicate with customers this way and be able to offer this as a service. And thank you for your kind words. It means a lot. Thank you for the kind words from Mark Raven. It says, hi, Greg, you're loved. So just try to help people. I think it's a pleasure to be able to help people realize their creativity. All right. So you see comment from Jay the Jolly. He says, so many people here from many places. I come from Denmark, so I basically classify as an alternate dimension, right? We're all sort of potato hovering around here, it seems, but we're kind and don't bite. So I bought enough Legos for my son. I should have probably an honorary citizenship to Denmark. So I was going to actually fly through there. I had a trip going, and I was going through Denmark, which I was excited to go through, but it got canceled when I was going to Hamburg right at the start of COVID. So, but I look forward to going to Denmark. Looks like a beautiful country. All right. Gareth wants everyone to smooch the like button. All right, so we see Randy Lee Music says, question, if you own Wavelab, does that interfere with Wavelab Go in Cubase 15 or the other way around? So now, what happens, so if you have the full Wavelab version, if we come over here and let's say, okay, I want to take this audio file, let's take this audio file, and we could just say edit in Wavelab. So once we do an edit in Wavelab, or we do it as a ARA extension, so we say edit in Wavelab, it's going to launch the Wavelab version that you have. So if you have Wavelab Pro, it's going to launch Wavelab Pro. If you only have the included Wavelab Go, it'll launch Wavelab Go. So the two won't conflict. They'll just run whatever the highest license is that you have. All right, so we see Jada Jolly says he makes more music than he listens to, but he's open to any genre, any level of power, as long as it comes from the human mind. So you could look into it. Great statement. All right, so we see Tiago says, I recently tried to restore my settings from the profile manager, but my Project Logical Editor presets were not saved. Don't know what happened. I used to export my settings every 3 months. So with the Project Logical Editor, one of the things that you can do, pretty sure that they are included, but if you come over here to the setup, so let's say if you go to show user presets location, that will just take you to your logical editor and Project Logical Editor. So if you get to your user presets, you could just quickly navigate there and save that whole folder if you need to as well. I'll do a test just to and see if I could recall it on a different, I think I have a machine that doesn't have any of my Project Logical Editor presets on it, and see if it is included in the profile manager. If you want to ask me for next Tuesday's live stream. All right, see Michael Graybill saying hi from Dallas. Says, wonder what new thing I'll learn today. All right, Mark Rabin is saying, his dog Stella is saying hi to my cat Steven. I think he's outside on the couch in the next room, taking his nap so he could be up all night. So Mark Rabin says, Greg, are you still doing trivia contests? We haven't done one in a while. I think the last one we did was for the 500th live stream. We should probably done one for the 2000th hour. Maybe when we come up to like the 600th live stream, we could do another trivia contest. Or if you just want, I do have some questions prepared that I've taken notes on. But if, or if you want to just kind of do a general trivia on each live stream, we could do that, but we could save it up for some prizes when it's kind of an appropriate time. Michael Teams also is a fan of detachable cables for headphones. And yeah, Mark Raven saying the detachable mini XLR cable. All right, so Mark Raven says, yes, I trust my cans, must be 20th pair, I know them. If I had to do it again, I would go with Focals. I like them a lot. So I think anything that you're kind of used to listening to is important. See, Jay the Jolly says, if I ever do get a chance to visit Denmark, do appreciate checking out the Viking village and visit Ribe. Visit it once, and it's amazing. Fascination of Viking history. So I think I got to see it once. One of my friends at Steinberg, when I was in Hamburg, took me up to like the very northern tip of Germany. It might have been the North Sea, and we could see kind of Denmark across I believe it was Denmark that we could see across the water, but didn't make it out there. All right, so you see Mark Rabich says the problem he's having with his headphones right now is longevity, it seems. And I think the same speakers, the longer I listen, the more distorted my listening capacity becomes. All right, so let's jump to a question that was mailed in advance. We had a number of questions mailed in for today. All right, let me open up a quick project. All right, so the first question was how to clean up a rhythmically sloppy performance using free warp. Okay. All right, so say like maybe this bass part isn't quite lined up. So we'll put it on the click track. All right, so one of the things we could do just to kind of make this whole process easier is we want to put in kind of warp markers. So I'm going to go to my hit points here, and let's kind of just edit the hit points so we could have hit points kind of at rhythmically significant points in the file. Okay. And then under the create, we could just come over here and let's create warp markers. So now when I come over and we switch to our warp tool, we could put it into free warp. So I could just kind of come over here. So let's say like this note here. I'm just going to, and if we need to get rid of a warp marker, we can do this. But if we wanted that first, like after the slide, the first note to fall on a beat, what I could do now is just simply go over to the right of the note, and you see where it turns white as we do this. I could just slide that over. And so now when you get that slide, we can just and if we want to be like really precise about it and say, okay, like this warp marker, we want to so when we have parts that are just going to be like probably that last bass hit was early, so let's come over here. All right, so again, what we could do is just kind of take these particular warp markers, and we could just, again, come over and say, okay, I want this to be on beat 4. And you could have it kind of automatically snap. So let's say, okay, now we have this. And if I wanted that to be on the and of 4, and let's say this note was a little, I wanted that note to be over again. So when you just kind of come over here to the, you could put your own warp markers in and just say, okay, I need this note. And you want the warp marker to kind of be like after as an anchor so that you could just move like particular notes and have it snap. So we can say, okay, we want that to snap to the downbeat. So as we work with this, so like we could say this one is probably going to be early. So again, hover where you see like the little vertical line to the left of the tool. When that turns white, come over and you can just. So again, this whole process to kind of get started, and if you have like, your hit point sensitivity is a little too high, once you're in here, we could just adjust kind of the intensity of the notes as well, and this will give us fewer warp markers. So once you have those warp markers, you can just freely move your different parts around to make it more rhythmically accurate. So if you have like a whole performance and one note's a little early, a little late, it's no problem just to kind of slide it around. All right. All right, let me just jump back. All right, reading through comments. All right, let's go to next question. All right, so we see, good evening. I'm using the Spectral Layers extension in Cubase Pro 15. I don't have Spectral Layers Pro. When I open one audio channel, the lead vocals, it seemingly plays out of time with the other tracks, making it completely unusable. Why is this happening? I created the project by dragging and dropping the stems from my file browser into the project. I'm using Cubase 15 Pro on a Windows computer. Okay, so I'm kind of listening to that. So let's say if we have a vocal guitar, So if I'm here, let's say I take this.
Maybe it's a sparkle in her eyes, or just the time she was living in. But it was real fast, dangerous, and certainly a sin.
And let's say in this case I wanted the vocal to be louder. So what I did is I unmixed this already. So I selected the track. We went to spectral layers as our ARA extension. So when I double click, we're in our ARA. And what I can do now, and I just unmixed the vocals.
Maybe it's a sparkle in her eyes, or just the time she was living in. But
Right. So now I have my files right here. Now, one of the things I don't understand from the question is says I created the project by dragging and dropping the stems from my file browser into the project. So I wouldn't, so I wouldn't do it from the file browser. I would just come over here. So let's say I want this to, we're going to move our play position directly to the start of that event. And so if I wanted my vocals out, I don't do it from the file browser. I would just select it in spectral layers here. So here I just unmix the vocals. And now when I drag it to a track, we can now have the vocals automatically playing. So let's say as we play, it's taking the vocals out of this.
maybe it's a sparkle in her eyes, or just the time she was living in. But it was real fast, dangerous, and certainly a sin.
So if I wanted to put a little delay.
The politics of love. The politics doing things in our minds that would make our mother love. It was a 90-second.
So at that point, we could just, come over and just do processing on just the particular vocal part. So as we want to, come over here, so the vocals we could just drag to a completely new audio track. So let's just come here. Let's make an audio track. And then I could just take the particular vocals and, drag them over and make sure that they kind of start at the same point in the project. And so, and it's placed directly based on where the cursor position is. So, move the cursor right to there. And then when you drag the vocals over, at that point you could just simply have those vocals, right on. Let me just select just the vocals. And now the vocals are just directly right there in their own track. So that's all you'd have to do. So let me know why you're kind of dragging from the file browser. If it's because generally it's breaking it into the layers here, then you could drag it from the spectral layers extension right into the program. All right, so we see, says a question, I have another question. How can I denoise a guitar recording, for example, in Cubase Pro 15? There is a consistent noise from my pedal board. So if you have, the Spectral Layers Pro would allow you to kind of take a specific, let's say if I come over here, and on this particular track, let's put a spectral layers extension. So the Cubase itself doesn't have any denoising capabilities, but if we want to come over to spectral layers, Spectral Layers Pro will have some denoising, so you could actually just kind of select a particular region and say, okay, this is where the noise is isolated. And the Pro version, when you come over here, you could just say you want to denoise, and then you could register the noise, and Spectral Layers Pro will automatically remove that for you. But again, it doesn't come in the Spectral Layers Go. So Wavelab will have restoration, spectral layers will have restoration, but Cubase itself doesn't come with restoration. All right. Jump back to live questions, see if we have any others that come in. All right, let's jump back to more live questions. Okay, so we have a question. Why is my instrument track playing parts right after adding it when there are no events on the track? Where are these phantom notes coming from? Okay, so there's probably a good chance that this could be related to a chord track. So let's go ahead and I'll just revert this project here quickly. Okay, so let's say I have a chord track here. And I want to, let's say I add an instrument track. So we'll come over to like a Halligan Sonic. So let's say we'll get to Writing Room Synths. All right, so let's say we'll just do, all right, so a lot of times what can happen is if you hear something along the lines of this, we could say, okay. All right, so we don't have any parts on this track here, but if we have on the chord track, what you could do is if you have, when you add tracks, that it's automatically record enabled when selected. So if I come over here to, let's say, a violin part, and then this is, you know, so and if we have, so what can happen is on the chord track itself, it's set to send the chords out to the monitored tracks. So if we don't want the chords to, and people will often use that to kind of like add little fillers inside of different parts so that, you know, just kind of fill in space. So if you don't want that, all you have to do is mute the chord track, and then that's not going to send the MIDI information out to play back through monitored tracks. So mute the chord track. If you have a chord track and you're just kind of hearing parts that you didn't play in, parts that are on empty parts, on empty tracks. So if you're hearing that, it's probably that, and we could set the chord track to go out to a specific instrument or MIDI device, or we could just simply mute the chord track itself. All right. Let's see if we got more live questions. Okay, we'll jump back to mailed in questions. All right, it says, I have a question about the quick mix down button that we can have in the top of the Cubase display. When pressed, I wanted to be able to take the name of the project, and it's not simple today. I might miss something. I don't use autosave, and my naming scheme of the files is like this: Cubase 15 _1 example P108G setup. Okay, so it's Cubase version number, save number, name of project, stage of production, tempo, and room, notes note about. It says, I save often manually with the new save number and note, so it could be a mix down in save 10 when I do work in save 15, and I want to do mix down then. And the quick save button gives no help in getting the new naming scheme. The normal mix down helps me with this function. Excuse me, it'll come my throat. Helps me with this function to name the mixdown as the project name, and that is what I want. At the quick mixdown choice would be okay. So if we, when we do the quick mixdown, kind of the intention is that the whole mixdown process for some people was confusing with naming schemes, and there's obviously a place for that. And as you described the file naming conventions that you have. Those all make perfect sense. But for a lot of people who just like, okay, I want to mix down my project. That's why quick save was intended to be just super fast and easy. So like people would, have entire projects and they would do a mix down and like their markers wouldn't be set right, and they mix down like only a chorus of a song when they intended to mix down. So we wanted to simplify the whole process. If we do a quick audio export, we could do it just from hitting this icon here. We get the name of the file. So instead of going through a naming scheme, here we could just give it a name. We want this to go into our mix down folder, and I'll hit save. It's going to export. I don't have to set the locators. I don't have to do a lot, and it automatically shows you where the file is and selects the file in your Windows Explorer or Mac OS Finder. So if you want it to automatically extract the name of the project and have naming schemes, probably quick audio export isn't the feature that's designed for that. It's going to be, again, designed primarily for using, to simplify the entire process so that you don't have to do naming schemes. So if you want it to, carry over and have it automatically named with the project file, then I would do the traditional export audio. And when you need it just quickly to do something for the customer who doesn't know what the naming scheme is, then the quick audio export is probably more applicable for that use. All right. Another question we had. Hi, Greg. I'd like to ask how to record played notes from Arpache or Arpache SX to Cubase 14 Pro. Latest update. When I drag the green line divider, it stops firing the arpeggiator. I tried to bridge over Groove Agent, but that does not work. All right, so let's take a look. So let's say if I have an Arpache plugin, so let's say I take this. Okay, so right now we have an Arpache SX. So if I turn this off, all right, so now when I do this, we have the Arpache. When I play a chord, and I'll just open up the keyboard editor here so we can. Let's adjust it up an octave. All right, now if we want to record that output, what we would do is just come over, and you mentioned moving the line down. So we want to move that line down. So I still hear. All right, so now I'm going to just place Cubase into record. All right, and now we can see that when I record, we have all of the arpeggios kind of automatically recorded directly into the system. So I'll just close the keyboard. So we look at it and we play it. We can see the arpeggio is automatically captured. So as soon as, if I have this open and I have the green line above and I just hold down the notes as we're playing here, we hear the arpeggio, but it's just recording kind of the block notes it's playing through the arpeggio. I move this line down. And we can see, so I move the line up above. And now when I play the notes, it's just going to do kind of the block chords. But we still hear the arpeggio. But just moving that down is always recorded that particular MIDI plugin for me. All right, let's jump back, see if we have more live questions. Okay, we see Mark Raven's gotten puppy eyes from Stella, so Stella's going for a swim. All right, Jay the Jolly asks, says you don't have to, but can you give us a little demo specifically of the FM percussion part of the drum machine? It would be neat. Plan to use that a lot when I upgrade. I loved it when I saw it. It's such a small thing compared to all the other features, but it's just what ended up selling me on the upgrade, even if it's such a simple thing compared to all the other features. What's a simple thing for something, is, like incredibly impactful for other people. So everyone has their little simple thing that gets them emotionally. So let's say if we want to, so I'm not sure if it's FM synthesis or just kind of synthesis in general, but let's say if I come over and now I wanted to have like my kick drum. So let's say I come over and we'll just get our kick drum. Not sure why it's taking so long. Now I'll just force quit real quick here. Nope. Let's see if it wakes up here. Let me just try to restart it here. Wake it up. All right, so one of the cool things we have with the drum machine is the ability to, not only kind of merge samples and synthesis in one kind of very easy to use tool. Okay, so we'll add a drum track. Okay, so let's say we want to kick. All right, so as we play. So, what's kind of cool is how we can shape this particular sound. So if you want to adjust the tuning of it, we could add more click. Or if we don't want like a really percussive clicky attack, we could adjust the tone. Let's come over here to our pitch decay. And we could also adjust so if we go to our envelope depth, we can just kind of come over here. So let's say we got like a subtle velocity, or if we hit it hard. And we could add distortion. And increase the level. Alright, so let's say we want to come over to a snare, so we could select our snare hit. Let's go to hi-hat. Alright, and for Beverly, we'll put it in the cowbell. So we could just come right over here. So let's say we get to, and again, we want to adjust. We'll select our cowbell. All right, so, and let's say we'll click on our hi-hat or our snare, and then as we want to, again, come over here, let's add more noise to kind of get it more attack. So you can kind of play with kind of different, almost like you're tuning the particular drums. Let me just cut back on the distortion there and my decay. All right, so let's say we have, and let's come over to, let's just go to new pad here. Say, okay, let's put in, we'll do shaker. All right, now the cool thing is how this integrates in directly with the editor. So let's say if I come over, okay, I want to put kick. We'll do a quick 4 on the floor. We could also just come here to our closed hi-hat and say every second. And let's go to our cowbell and we can randomly. And we could adjust kind of Euclidean. And let's just bring our velocity down. And let's say we want every third note. So now I could just come over here to the drum machine and say I want to tweak my kick drum. So all those sounds can be synthesis based. So let's come back over to now we could also program other aspects from the drum machine. So let's say I want to adjust the decay. So on the kick drum. So we have this as our decay. So I could right click and say pattern editor. And now when I go to the pattern editor, I could say, okay, let's come over here to my decay. And I could say, let's just make that last kick drum. And let's come over to our snare and say, okay, let's just find our snare and let's just find the tuning. So say, okay, we're here. All right, so, and I could also say, okay, let's get to a modulator, and let's add a modulator to the snare. So let's get to an LFO. And at this point, when we hit play, let's make it like, so you could kind of just change all sorts of creative things, making new drum beats and being able to use LFOs, be able to actually take the different, so when you're on your kick, you could take parameters for the instrument and automatically put it into the pattern editor as well. And then you go, okay, maybe I like this particular pattern. I want to start we'll create a new pattern, and I want it to be randomly generated. So now, and let's come over here, make a new pattern. And we could just come up with beats. And modify existing patterns or change random patterns. So you come up with like really creative results very quickly. And you can do all that without touching a single MIDI key or hitting a drum pad. All right. All right, so we see, says, what's the correct way of using the different scales in the chord pads if I choose a preset and change the root note? All right, so let's say if we come over here to quick chord pad, so let me just open up. Okay, so let's say if we're in the chord pads, so there are scale presets that came in 1502. So let's say if we come over here to scale, so let's say, okay, I want it to be major, like Ionian mode. All right, so now I'm just triggering like the chords that would fall in a C major scale. But let's say I want it to be in the key of D instead. So when I come over here, when I switch to root key, we can go from a D major to, or C major to D major. So when I come over here, so I could go. So it's going to be the same kind of relationship between the chords, but we could choose kind of our root key. So if we want it to be E major, F major, so I don't have to put in a separate preset for C major versus D major. I could put in kind of major and then change the root key. So if we were doing a different scale here, so let's say, okay, I want to do my Aeolian. So let's just come over here. So we say, okay, we're in C. But if I wanted this to be instead of C minor to A minor, and then if we want to keep it in the minor, the Aeolian mode or the natural minor scale, we can now come over here and say, okay, I want it to be in G minor, and now we could transpose all the pads based around the tonality. So you could take any of the presets here. So let's say, okay, we go to arena chords. And instead of in A, I want this in A flat. So let's say our guitarist is drop tuning a half step. So I don't have to reprogram everything. I could just choose that same particular pattern, but change the root notes. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, so we see from Alex says the arpeggio trick is a nice feature. Thanks. Beverly's happy we incorporated cowbell for her. All right. All right, so we see, this is from Jay the Jolly. He says, man, I'm just getting pumped to play with that drum synth and add some non-linear filters for a funky effect when I upgrade. It's just going to be great. So, yeah, all sorts of great stuff. All right, let me jump back to our question that came in. All right, so we see, hi Greg, I have a Motu MIDI Express 128 older USB device with 8 ins and outs. I also have an Akai MPK Mini that I use as a MIDI remote with Cubase and a smaller keyboard to just try out sounds. Despite both showing up fine in the MIDI setup and all appropriate channels active, unfortunately the two do not play nice with Cubase. If I tried to let Cubase sort out MIDI when it first boots up, the Akai MPK Mini will not function as a MIDI remote. It seemingly happens as the Motu MIDI Express 128 hogs too much, so the MPK doesn't seemingly load properly. I can rectify this either by unplugging the Motu MIDI Express 128 while booting up Cubase, when then plugging it in, or limiting how many active ports the MIDI Express to limiting how many active ports to the MIDI Express to 2. Either way, with the Motu MIDI Express 128 limited, the MIDI remote functions of the Akai MPK Mini work fine. When I approached Akai, they said, yes, we have received reports from several users experiencing the same issue. This is a result of the recent Windows update, which installs the Windows MIDI services. They then recommended uninstalling any Windows updates that might include the Windows MIDI services and sent me a link to a diagnostic tool for MIDI check service that checks if it is installed. I don't want to ramble on much further, but do you know what these developments are? And from Yamaha Steinberg perspective, is there currently Windows issues with MIDI handling, especially with multiple devices at the same time? Should I have this new MIDI services tool installed or not? All right, so recently there is a rather significant update for the Windows MIDI services, which includes MIDI 2.0 stuff. For the longest time, it was really only available as part of Mac OS, and until just about 6 weeks ago, really, you weren't able to take advantage of MIDI 2.0 functions. So this has changed some of the, how older MIDI interfaces are interacting, because we used to have always direct music ports. You would have ignore port filters. So on my system, I have 2 of the older Steinberg Mid-X 8s that I've just bought over the years. And for me, prior to this update, my Mid-X 8s weren't working, and they weren't functioning in Windows 11. And I was really close to buying another MIDI interface so I could access all of my extended outboard rack equipment. But after that update, my Mid-X 8s started working immediately, and I have 16 ports of MIDI in and out with my Mid-X 8s. I also have other MIDI interfaces. I have one on my AXR4U audio interface. I have MIDI interface for my CC1 1-to-1 controller. I have a MIDI interface on the Chord controller and a MIDI interface on my Nectar P4. So I have 20 ports going in and out. So it could be that perhaps, the Motu isn't, hasn't, the Motu drivers aren't working well with new Windows MIDI services. Maybe there's an update. Maybe it's Akai that's doing it. One other thing to check out is to make sure that the power. Also, I have on my MIDI, on my Windows 11, I also have the choice OS controller. So I have 21 ports of MIDI connected, and they all work as expected. So it's not a limitation of the Windows port. It's probably going to be something with, maybe the drivers for the Motu or the Akai need to be updated. So if they both work without the other one connected, try connecting some of the sources. If they're both USB powered, USB only has a finite amount of power. So check to make sure that you don't have any power saving functions on the USB port that are causing it, that are maybe throttling the power requirements. Because a lot of times when you have stuff like this, it's kind of working or it's not working when these two are both plugged in. It could be not necessarily like a Windows MIDI driver problem, but it could be a power problem, that the two devices are draining too much of the USB power. So if they're connected into a hub, make sure make sure it's a powered hub, that it is connected. If you connected, your MPK controller to another port, another USB port, see if that makes a difference. Sometimes some MIDI ports will be powered and some are almost functioning as a MIDI hub. Like in a desktop PC, you may have that. So try different ports and see if that makes a difference. But I have, for me, the latest Windows 11, brought back 16 of my MIDI ports for me. So actually, I guess I have 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 ports of MIDI going in and out on Windows 11, and it's been flawless and working great. So, but check your USB power. All right, so we see how do you change the channel count for a routing folder? Okay, so let's say if I have an audio track here, so let's say I have 4 tracks. All right, and now I want to assign all of these to a routing folder. All right, so if we wanted to add, when you say channel count, so if I add a new audio track, with that selected, it's automatically in the folder. If I have the folder closed and I add an audio track, it's going to be outside of the folder. So if I don't have anything selected, if it is going to be like tracks that are, when you say increased channel count, I'm not sure if that's referring to surround. So let's see if I add like a 5.1 out and I add audio tracks. So let's add 3 audio tracks that are 5.1. They're going to my 5.1 output. All right. So we see that these are 5.1 tracks. So let's move these tracks here to new folder with group channel. And then let's see if we route this to a 5.1 output. So if I come here, let's put just a quick test tone on one of the channels here. But yeah, so we could just, change the output routing when we make the folder from stereo to 5.1, and we can see that this routing folder here is now outputting 5.1 from that test tone generator. All right, next question. Is it possible to open a polyphonic wave file recorded with the Zoom F8 and Cubase and have all these separate tracks? Okay. So let me just import an audio file. I think I have an interleaved. Okay, so let's say we have a track here, and it's going to be like the Zoom F8, I believe, is just going to be a basically like a field recorder. So you may record one wave file, and you see this also with digital mixers. So if you record like a show from a digital mixer, you may realize that the wave file that you copy over from like the SD card, maybe like a 32 channel or 24 channel interleaved file. All right, so when we want to split those, we would select the track, go to your project menu to convert tracks and say multi-channel to mono, and we can just hit OK. And now we can see that our multi-channel interleaved file has now automatically been split to individual mono files. So again, select the track, project, and let's come over to convert tracks and mono. You would select multi-channel to mono. All right, see if we have more live questions. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so you see from Beverly Beatty says a big thank you to Greg Jazz Dude and all on the Cubase live stream today. She's got a roll. All right, Two Wheels Post says, I have an old Chord MIDI controller, the Micro Control. Where can I find a preset for the MIDI remote tab so I can control Cubase with the controller? So I know it comes with nano control support right out of the box, but you may, go to, probably if you just search, there is a repository of different MIDI remote scripts that you can find on the Steinberg forum. So if you look for that, there's probably someone has made one, but actually making a remote control, a MIDI remote control, is pretty simple as well. So it may not be like a preset for that, but the nano control, as soon as you connect it and hook it up, it's immediately working right away for you. Let's see, DJ Dollar Bill says, I had Mode 2 issues prior to Cubase 12 with Win 10. I used to run the Mode 2 reinstall tool and start up 10 seconds max to make it usable. No issues on Windows 11, Cubase 14. All right, we see the Jazz Dude is kind enough to share the MIDI remote scripts location. Thank you for that, Jazz Dude. Appreciate it. So look there for the Chord controller, the micro control. All right, John Barry VU says, "Hi Greg, I'm enjoying the new layer instruments for acoustic agent kits, but I did come across a side snare and the new punch kit is not working. Loads of layer instruments in the mixer, but no sound." All right, so let's take a quick look. So I'm not sure if it's the SE version or not, so let's come over here. All right, sorry, move this down. Student. Oh, sorry, it's breaking into my 5.1 out. We just tried on a new project here. Sorry about that. All right, so just all right. So you said it was. I did come across the side snare and the new punch kit is not working. All right, so let me just. Okay, so it's the side 6 snare there. So let me just. So I see the side snare rim shot, the side snare hit. So this is in the SE version. I'll try it with the full version and see if that makes any difference. But let me know if it's a specific kit, John. But I think it's going to be roughly the same. But let me try the full Groove Agent. right, so if we come here, this side snares, I think there's another one in this bank. So all cymbals. So maybe you could let me know, John, if it's a particular kit or what the MIDI note number is that's used for that. Okay, so you see clarification from John. Okay, so you see the side snare in the punch kit, when you add a layer, the layer does not work. Thanks. Okay. Let's see if I remember. Just having a brain cramp on replacing just that one sound. I forgot how to do that. I'll take a look at it and see if I get it, or if you can send me your brain cramp reminder. See if I can remember. See if I figure it out here quickly. Sorry. I'll play around with it, John. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So, okay, I see John give me my brain cramp reminder. It's an edit tab for the instrument, bottom of the kit. Okay. Thanks, John. All right, let me just give it a try with another snare. Okay. All right, try one more time here. All right, let me try just a different kit, see if that makes any difference. Maybe from... That doesn't seem to work. I'll pass that along. Sorry about that, John. Thanks for the brain cramp email reminder. Okay, let's jump to, I think we have one more question that was mailed in. Let me open up project. Okay. It says, hello, Greg. How can you pan and limit instruments in the left-right spectrum so that in targeted areas only one instrument is heard, preventing frequency overlap? Okay. It says, I mean, volume only left 9 to 10 o'clock and right symmetrical 14 to 15 o'clock. So how can spectral domain supervision optical mask be combined with the frequency EQ to automatically handle overlapping frequencies? And why doesn't Steinberg offer this as an AI tool like Ozone? All right, so let's say if we have kind of like an orchestration here. All right, so let's go ahead and just listen. Make sure everything else is. All right, so let's say here we have like, let's say violin and violin and clarinet playing kind of the same thing. So let's say. And then I think we're going to have cello and bassoon. All right, so if we wanted to kind of pan these, probably, so let's say I want to pan these. So a lot of times, you know, when we're doing orchestral stuff, which is, I believe, okay. All right, so just rereading the question. It says violin only. Okay, so if we're doing orchestral stuff, a lot of times the sample instrument libraries themselves will place the instruments at the kind of the position within the orchestra, which can mitigate this. So sometimes, let's say if we were coming over here to our bassoon. But if we wanted to, so what I would do is just kind of come over here if we wanted to pan these. I would like probably just go to the panner here. And let's just take a look in the mix console window here. Make it a little easier to see. Oh, I still have these going to 5.1. Let me just change my audio connections here. Okay, so when I want to come over here, what I would do is probably just say we have our stereo track here. So generally mixing, there isn't like the approach I would take is kind of setting up the balanced panner. So let's say if I'm here, we could do the right click and do the stereo combined panner. And let's bring in the cello. And what I would do here is again, kind of do the combined panner. All right, so let's say, okay, sorry, wrong channel. All right, let me just make sure these are all going to different outputs on my mixer, sorry. All right, so I think these are all going to same outs. So let's come over to my mix. I'll say it's going out to out 2, out 3, and out 4. Okay, so now we have discrete outputs. Okay. So again, I would do the combined panner. So now we play both those together. And come over here. So stereo combined panner for cello, and let's say for bassoon, stereo combined panner again. Now if you wanted to, let's say, work with this and find frequency clashing, so a lot of times just panning, but using the combined panner, if you're doing orchestral stuff, as you mentioned, violins, I would do the combined panner, and then you could place it with and limit it within the particular panning spectrum. So you could say, I want the cello to be over to the right, and maybe the bassoon, which is generally kind of a little left center in the orchestra. And then you could just kind of work with the panning there. Now, if you see like different, so let's say if I come here to this channel EQ, we could also do the EQ masking. So if we come over here, we can say, okay, I want this to be with slot 2, and then you could combine like the different EQ sources here. So if we adjust, so there are tools that will do like frequency suppression and stuff like that. A lot of it doesn't, I find that you don't necessarily have to do that if it's well orchestrated. If you kind of followed, for orchestral stuff, if you're doing orchestral stuff, if you follow the traditional conventions of orchestral placement, and a lot of libraries do that for you automatically. So a lot of times it's not, it's maybe solving an audio issue, and but a lot of times it's not figuring out what what the true problem is. So while there are some AI tools, I haven't found, like many that have benefited more than often, just what, a simple EQ is doing, or dynamic EQ. So you do have all sorts of dynamic EQ where you could sidechain. So let's say if I wanted to go to my bassoon part here, and we go to the slot. So let's say we're in our bassoon, and we go to our frequency EQ. Here we could just sidechain. So say we wanted this to go to and we could put this as a dynamic EQ and say we'll do band 6 as a dynamic EQ. And so we can say this is going into sidechain 6. And we can add the violin as your sidechain source. So that as we do so let's say if we come over here, let's say that you could just be able to adjust and do your sidechain. So I think while AI solutions always seem like they're great, often you're still making the final decision with your ears. So I've seen some stuff where, it's effective if something is so obviously clashing that you would be hard pressed to actually create a scenario where, it's clashing that much but you're still kind of using your ears, and you could use like the comparative EQ here. You could also use like the masking functions found in supervision to help get you to that particular solution. But I think the ultimate solution will be reliant upon your musical sensibilities in your mixing. Okay. See, Jazz Dude summed it up much better than I did it. AI doesn't replace experience and skills. All right, you see Randy Lee music is taking off. All right, Jay the Jolly asks, do I understand that while Nuendo is a different product, essentially it's still built on and have all the Cubase in it plus more? Overkill for a bedroom musician like me, but curious. So yeah, it's going to have, specific tools and often very specialized tools for audio post-production, some more immersive mixing functions, and game audio work as well. All right, we see Alex says, thanks, Greg. Enjoy your Friday university session. So I guess I'll enjoy not doing an index on Friday night. I'll get a Friday night off for once. But thank you for the kind words. And so we see Jay the Jolly says, as far as I can understand regarding AI, both Yamaha and Steinberg seem to be human creativity first in their philosophy, which is great. Yeah, so it says, so AI tools are probably more tools than generative in any way. So I think that's a good description. I think a lot of AI companies obviously are looking for users to generate data for them, and kind of look at users as being someone that's contributing to the algorithm, whereas I think Yamaha and Steinberg just want people to make great music together using our tools. So, all right, seems like we're at the end of questions. We see Graham Witcher on from Oxford. Thanks for joining. See if there's any more questions that pop in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. So once again, we will not have a live stream this upcoming Friday. We'll be back 1 week from today, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So on the 19th. All right, so we see from Jay the Jolly, says, the Suno guy said musicians do not enjoy making music anymore, and I have not heard anything more delusional. Let's all enjoy making stuff together here. So it's great. I think, for me, it's interesting. Like the last couple years, I started playing in an orchestra again since I've been home. And there's, something really magical, talking to someone who saw the performance, and they're like, I can't believe one person could have 60 people together make, such a unified sound. I think there's something always really special in live performance. So, and we all enjoy making music together in the orchestra, as we all enjoy doing projects and creating stuff. And there's a lot of, I think it's hard to quantify, but there's a, musical satisfaction is something that's probably important to all of us. All right, John Barry VU says, how many modulators can we have on one instrument? So you could have 8 modulators, but you could have, so let's come over, so let's say if we go to start adding modulators to part, so let's say if we come over, so I think it's going to be like 64. So let's say if we add an LFO, so this LFO we can send to 8 destinations. So let's say if we open this up, we'll open up the instrument. So let's say, okay, so we want to learn. All right, so let's add another source. So we could have the 8 destinations per modulator and 8 modulations. So you get an 8 modulators. So I think it's 64 modulators should be enough, I think. So you could just kind of keep adding modulators to, come over here. I want that modulator, and I think we could have 8 different modulators going at once, and each of those modulators can have like 8 destinations, I believe. So once again, it's 8 modulators, each modulator multiple destinations. So you can have 64 modulators going at once. Jazz Dude said he stopped at 38 in Omnisphere. Says, all right, Michael Teams wishing everyone a great week. All right, Jay the Jolly says, my last note for this time before I go tonight is there always be a space for human art and people who enjoy it. That brings lots of joy to me, even if we lost a little in the mainstream. So it's good thoughts. All right, see if there's more modulator or more questions that come in. I know there's usually about a 20 to 30 second delay from when I speak to when you guys hear. Give it a little bit of time. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you want to send questions in advance for Tuesday's live stream, will be you can send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right. Well, it looks like we are out of questions. We see Michael Graybell joining. All right. Thanks for the kind words, Adam. All right, so I guess we will go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll be back on Tuesday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. If you have questions you want to send in advance, send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, thanks for being part of such a wonderful community. Look forward to seeing everyone back on Tuesday. Thank you so much, and goodbye.